All right, everybody, on today's episode of Locked On Avalanche, the Athletic has finally gotten to the Avs and their season preview. We will talk about that. I think we were going to talk about it the other day, but we never got around to it. Should guys like Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar and Mikko Rantanen, should they be playing more in the preseason? We will discuss that. And why not throw out some, I wouldn't necessarily say predictions for the Stanley Cup final, but maybe matchups we would like to see if the Avalanche are lucky enough to make it back there again. Who would we want them going up for their second Stanley Cup championship in a row? Let's get to it all.
You're Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Because I'm pretty sure none of us want to have another Avalanche Lightning matchup. I think we're pretty safe saying the Lightning will not be brought up in that segment. Some teams will, and maybe you will, and maybe you won't want this matchup or whatever we're thinking. But it's kind of fun at this stage in the coming up to the regular season, the preseason, kind of talk about stuff like this, and then look back and realize how wrong we were. So it's always fun to do. Welcome aboard, everybody. Locked On Avalanche. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. You can follow us on our social media outlets, LOPN_Avalanche on Twitter, Locked On Avalanche on Instagram. Questions, comments, concerns, opinions, lockedonavalanche@gmail.com. And follow us on our YouTube channel over on the YouTube. Hit subscribe, get notified when a new show goes live. Before we get to any of this stuff, Shaggy, I just posted that thing that our listener Josh had sent us, and it's his house decorated for Halloween. If you don't follow on Twitter and didn't see it, I haven't put up to Instagram yet, but I will put up on Instagram. He decorated it as his house, and there's just one section of it where there's basically the Grim Reaper. I don't think it has an Avalanche jersey on, but it has the Avalanche logo on it, and he's standing tall. And beside him are four graves, I'm sorry, with the logos of all the teams. It's got, the Predators, it's got the Oilers, It's got Tampa, it has all the Blues, has all the teams that they beat on each one of the gravestones. But the piece de resistance in that is coming out of the St. Louis Blues grave is just like a skull and bones with a Blues jersey and a water bottle sitting right in front of it. It's brilliant.
You fill in the blank.
Oh, it was great. It's great. So, and I give him credit for buying a Blues jersey, probably just to do this too, by the way. So,
and four graves, and none of them are named Ryan.
No. Alan will like that one. All right, everyone. So, the Athletic, we'll get started with that.
Yeah.
If you don't subscribe to the Athletic, Kyle and I talk about it all the time. Absolutely love what they do and how they cover all sports, especially obviously hockey. It is a subscription-based website, so if you don't subscribe to it, we are not affiliated with them whatsoever. I would recommend it, especially with the hockey season here. And they do things like what they're doing right now is they're doing like season previews for every single team, and they're doing one a day. And essentially it's amounting to like their power ranking to start the year. They're going from the worst to the best. The worst was Arizona, and they are now almost done with it. And I was kind of interested to see where the Avalanche would be. I didn't know, and this is why I kind of like the Athletic. They didn't just throw them in at number one. They actually threw the Avalanche in at number 3. And they base it on models. They base it on the last 3 years. They take that into account. They lean heavily on the GSVA model, which, if you don't know what that means, it stands for game score value added. It's a very convoluted formula that I can't even figure out, but the experts know. They can just look at it, know what it's all about. So they use a lot of analytics. It's not just what these guys feel. So they're going off of numbers. And they have the Avalanche at number 3. The only teams that they don't have ranked yet, and we'll know who number 2 is, and then subsequently, there we go, who number 1 will be. The only teams they haven't done yet are Calgary and Toronto. So they will be number 1 and number 2. In what order, we don't know. We'll find that out on Wednesday. So for the Avs, they come in at number 3, and I love these season previews. I've read every single one of them. They're just so informative, and it's a good mixture of really deep analytics for the people that like that, and then just basic, like regular, just talk and writing about the team. So the people that just want to hear that stuff or read that stuff, you're included in that too. It's not just for the mathematician heads. So they have the Avs at number 3, and just on that, does that surprise you?
Yes, especially with the 2 names in front of them. I think Toronto has more questions than Colorado going into this season, especially with who, like you saw the reports about them putting forwards on defense and trying different roles out. Like Toronto seems like they are a huge enigma going into this year, where it's a make or break, especially with a lot of contracts up there. So
yeah,
Calgary, I mean, it's the sexy pick for number 1 for a lot of people. So I could see the argument for that. But Colorado at 3,
interesting.
I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
No, and I think a lot of people might throw their hands up and be like, "Oh, they won the cup and they should automatically be number 1." And a lot of people feel that way. And again, this is kind of why I like the Athletic. They're like, no, we're taking things into account. And one of the first things that they do in all of these is throw up a graphic, and I put it up on Twitter and Instagram. And it's a pretty simple graphic, and it just kind of gives you what the point projection is for the Avs. And according to them, 106.6 points. So we'll just say 106 or 107 points for the Avs is what they project them to do. 96% chance to make the playoffs, 11% chance to make the Stanley Cup. So then they do like these pluses and minuses thing, where they grade the forwards, your line, like everything. Basically, the only thing where the Avs fall short is in their 4th line. They have a D-. Their goalies at a C-. And so, but overall, they give them an A-. And then they individually rank some players, and they give them a score. And that score it's a 0 to 5. Although on Edmonton's, Connor McDavid comes in at a 5.4. I thought this thing maxed out at 5, which is MVP level. Somehow he's gone way over that.
You also need to take note that they spelled defense with a C.
They always do.
That is why your Edmonton Connor McDavid rating is through the ceiling.
Yeah, they've taken to that spelling of it. So you start at 0.0 and you go up to 5.0, and then there's different tiers along the way. Your stars here, so Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen come in at 4.4, which is in between that franchise player and MVP. Cale Makar comes in at 4.8. So he is as close as you can get to that MVP level. As in Gabe Landeskog's at a 3.1. That's right over what would be considered a star player. Val Nichushkin is at a 2.3, which is just over what would be considered a top player. Devon Taves at a 3.2. So he's over that star level. They talk about him a lot in this article. They really seem to be behind Taves, and kind of are saying, like, if it wasn't for Nathan MacKinnon, or excuse me, it wasn't for Cale Makar, we would be talking about Devon Taves all the time, is basically what they're saying.
And especially like with you talking about how they use so many metrics and analytics, and like Taser has been one of those guys, if you are in the school of mind for analytics and metrics of this nature, he's that in spades. Like, he has been a darling when it comes to analytics and putting up the stats no matter where he is. So him landing in Colorado, you would think that he would really burst on the scene, but Cale Makar has also been sharing some of that spotlight. But yeah, I could see why he has such a high rating. And he's been one of those guys that the hockey minds have been talking about for a very long time.
Yeah. So what they get, and interestingly enough, the Avalanche come in at number 3, like we've been saying. The Minnesota Wild are number 5 in this ranking. And how I was saying they have the Avs projected at 106.6 points. They have the Wild at 105.5. They have them right there with them.
It's going to be one of those years, huh?
But I don't even think it's the Wild. I'm big on Nashville. I really think Nashville is going to be that team. I think Minnesota will be there. But right on the heels of the Avs, I think they'll be close, but I don't think they're going to be a point away from them at the end of the regular season. That's just my thinking.
I agree.
That's why you play the regular season, because things surprise and things happen. They go through the projection. They obviously talk about the loss of Kadri, Burakovski, and Kuemper, and that's very real. They don't make any bones about that. They talk about who is the replacements of it. Obviously, they talk a lot about Alex Newhook. So they always have this one section called the big question, and the big question for them is, can the Avs repeat after losing Nazem Kadri, Andre Burakovski, and Darcy Kuemper in the offseason? And they basically say, like, yes, they can. And the thing with the Avs is that you have to remember is, I think because they were so good last year, and they really were kind of, I hate to use the term head and shoulders like above the rest of the league, but they were as close to that as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
They were a solid, great team. And yeah, the pieces that they lost dropped them back to the pack a little bit. It doesn't mean that teams have superseded them and overridden them. It's just that the Avs have come back to the pack a little bit, but they're still that team that can definitely win another Stanley Cup with what they have now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last year's team made household names out of guys like Darren Helm, Josh Manson, like the supporting cast that you typically don't think as pivotal pieces of a playoff team. The Avalanche did a really good job at making that last year in the playoffs, and you can do the same this year. Like there's no reason you can't do that with Erod or Sedlick or anybody who they decide to call up in that from the Eagles or any off-season move that the Avalanche have made. There's no reason they can't fit in, plug in, and continue what the Avalanche are doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. So they get into the Kadri thing, like I said earlier, and I'm looking forward to the Calgary one, because I want to see what they say specifically about Kadri for this season. They touch on it for this one, but because he's not a member of the Avalanche anymore, they don't dwell on it too much. But they basically say, like, to expect him to do what he did again is not likely, even if he was on the Avs. Like, yeah, he'd have a really good season, but he probably would, his production would probably dip a little bit. They don't go into the numbers and what they exactly would be, which is, like I said, why I want to read the Calgary one. But so they kind of say, like, if it's going to be Alex Newhook, to think that he can provide some sort of production in that realm is not too far-fetched. Will he do what Kadri did, not last year, but a regular Nazem Kadri-like year? Maybe he won't even do that, but he could do something close to it. And he doesn't have to be the guy that drives the production on a second line, because he's going to have two guys on the wings that are more than capable of doing that. And if it is Mikko Rantanen, if it is Artturi Lehkonen, let them be the guys that just pile up the stats, and he just has to not screw up, basically, and he'll be fine. So
yeah,
it's a good point that they made.
Yeah, and you got to understand, a lot of what Nas brought last year was that veteran presence and that understanding, and that, hey, you don't have to do it this way, try it this way. It's very unfair to say Newhook is going to be stepping into that role when he's figuring that out himself. Like, you got to differentiate what Kadri brought. If you are asking for that leadership, you're not getting it from Newhook or anybody, honestly. You're not going to get that from anyone. But if you want that offensive production, that's where Newhook could bring it in. That's where JT Compher could bring it in. That's whoever in that role, you could probably get that offensive production from somebody else, but you're not going to get that veteran leadership and that understanding of the game like Nas brought.
Yeah. And
Newhook really separate it.
And I say Newhook doesn't have to be like the one piling up points, but he can do that.
Yeah.
He is offensively gifted. And, if he can hit a stride, he will be every chance is going to be given to him to be that guy and kind of put up close to regular Nazem Kadri like numbers.
Yep.
And one thing that they said in here that really when they said it, I almost felt like, yeah, that's what I've been thinking. I just couldn't get it out. And what they said was, I'm paraphrasing, but it was almost like with Kadri, if guys like McKinnon went down or Mikko Rantanen went down, you felt okay. You felt comfortable, like, okay, we're not going to dip that much in production. And you kind of do with guys like Alex Newhook, not taking away what we were just talking about, his athletic ability and his offensive ability. But yeah, like you just get the feeling that if for whatever reason one of those top guys goes down, can someone like him have that next man up? Yeah, that's always possible, but it hasn't been shown yet. So when they said that, I'm like, yeah, that's a great point, because we've been through injuries how many times? And when you have someone like Nazem Kadri in your back pocket, you're still comfortable, like, okay, we're not going to miss a beat. And you want to get to that point with someone like Alex Newhook.
Yeah.
So they talk about a wild card. The wild card, they say, is Bone Byram, actually. And they're kind of like not on the fence with him. They know he has all the skill in the world, but it's the injury stuff. It's the concussion stuff. So they say, if he goes off, we're talking about Sam Girard next year, because the Avs are going to have to pay him if he goes off. If he doesn't, if he has just like a modest season, he's not going anywhere. They just won't have to shell out a ton of money for him. So that's kind of the wild card spot. They talk about their core. They list their core as Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Gabe Landeskog, Val Nichushkin, Cale Makar, Devon Taves, and Alexander Georgiev. I think they've been putting goalies in for most of that for the core. I think there was some where they haven't. Just interesting to see him involved with the core. But they talk about and they laud over how this team was constructed, and how this is like the blueprint for every team right now to, when you are down, how to build up a core. They say there is none better in the league. This is the best core in the league, hands down, end of discussion, end of argument. And it will be for a handful of seasons to come. So, and I really don't think you can argue that.
No deceit detected.
No. So that's the biggest part, is the core in this. They talk about the support. And that kind of goes back into the Newhook talk. They talk about Arturi Lekkinen in there. They even mention Logan O'Connor there. They talk about Evan Rodriguez. And then they kind of wrap all these up with best case scenario, worst case scenario, and bottom line. And for their best case scenario, they say McKinnon with the cup and a new contract taken care of, levels up, and finally wins a Hart, narrowly beating out Cale Makar. The replacements, particularly Georgiev, doesn't miss a beat, giving the Avs a refreshed group that shifts the narrative and starts a mini dynasty of its own. Colorado beats Toronto in one of the best cup finals that any of us have ever seen. The worst case scenario is the short summer catches up with the holdover, and the replacements can't pick up the slack or adequately replace Kadri, Burakovski, or Kuemper. McKinnon and Makar both deal with nagging injuries. Georgiev self-destructs in a 6-game first-round loss to Dallas. The bottom line, says the Avalanche, still measure up as contenders and as the best in the Central Division, but there are a number of new challenges that come with being the reigning champs. As the Stanley Cup winners, Colorado just became the model team to beat. It's who everyone wants to strive to be like and has to stack themselves up against. So they say, and then what's harder than winning a Stanley Cup? Winning back-to-back. So, we went through that article quickly. There's a lot in there. Like I said, a lot of stats, a lot of reasons why this guy will do well, or questions on this guy. Fantastic write-up. And I think they hit a lot of good points for the Avs in this season. And for them to say Avs in Toronto will play the best Stanley Cup final ever, that kind of tipped the hand. I feel that they put Toronto at number one. Just how I feel.
Ooh,
we will find out
Yeah,
tomorrow.
good thinking.
All right, let's hear from Bet Online, and then we'll get into about our starters. So, betonline.net, your number one source for all of your football betting info for this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game that you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sport wagering information with live betting, up-to-the-minute scores for every sport available. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head over to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. That is betonline.net, where the game starts.
Bing.
Go on. All right. So, we had our preseason game against Dallas where we finally saw our regulars and our stars and our starters, and it's nothing that's unusual. A lot of teams don't play their stars in the first couple games, and then they'll play them towards the end. And I kind of am wanting to bring this up, and I know it's a different sport with with football and the Denver Broncos right now that are just playing. I mean, they're 2-2 and they're lucky to be that. And I remember hearing when they were like, we're not going to play Russell Wilson at all in the preseason. Like, it was no mystery that you were not going to see him in the preseason. I thought that was a mistake.
Yep.
You have a brand new quarterback and a brand new system with a brand new head coach. And now look what's happening. And I feel like it's a direct result of him not getting a lot of reps in the preseason, among other guys. And for football, it's different, but because there's 18 games or 17 games, and every single game holds so much value. For a hockey season, you're not going to play those guys all the time in every regular preseason game because there's 82 games, and you have more time to, okay, if you get off to a slow start, you have more time to just combat that, and it's not going to really affect you that much down the road. But it's just like, you don't want to start the season off slow. So do you play, should teams be playing their stars more so they can hit the ground running on day one? Especially for the Avs, because day one is going to be a big day for them. You don't want to be rusty in that aspect.
You bring up very good points about dangerous and how the Broncos are playing dangerous right now because of that. You can see a lot of the same parallels in the Avalanche right now. There are some new faces there that have to learn the system and how things operate. And Nathan McKinnon needs to be out there and leading this team. We're not saying be there for the split squad, can't watch you in Minnesota game. We don't need you to be there. But this last week before the end of preseason, we need to see everybody out there working together because as you were talking about this, I pulled it up. We start out with a back-to-back.
Yeah, right.
That's a home and away back-to-back. And then you got it, you're right back into it. You have a back-to-back the next week, Seattle, and then you go to then you have Vegas.
Yeah.
And then the next week, another back-to-back. It's New Jersey and the Islanders. You need to be together, maximizing the time together, working together to hit this season. The article that we just mentioned from The Athletic brought up the point that the Avalanche did not start last year off the best.
Right.
And we kind of righted the ship, and it's tales all this time. Everybody knows what happens. You don't have that same caliber. We talked about Nas not being there, Berkey, and all those faces that helped right the ship. You have a new bunch of faces that still don't know how the Avalanche play hockey and how to play with Nathan McKinnon. They still won't have the understanding of playing with Gabe Landeskog or Luszczyszyn. They still have to figure that out. There's so much synergy that needs to be worked out. You want everybody on board as early as possible, figuring that out, because it's not going to get any easier when the season starts.
No. And what the Avs did last year is people can be saying the beginning of the regular season, doesn't matter. You can correct that. You can correct that ship. I get that. But like you don't want to get off on that foot.
Chicago didn't, and
Regardless.
look at what happened to them. They
Yeah.
couldn't. They started out slow and had to blow that team up.
Right. And I know injuries are, nobody wants to get injured in preseason. Nobody does. It's going to happen. And you have things that happen to what happened to like Trevor Zegras the other day. He took a shot. And why? Because the guy who gave him the shot's trying to make the team. So that stuff like that is going to happen. So, and they were talking about this on 32 Thoughts. And we kind of mentioned this kind of like tongue in cheek, but they kind of talked about it as it's been discussed. And I really wish this would happen. We're talking about football, and what do they do in football for preseason? The starting quarterback plays a drive or two and he's out. He doesn't play the rest of the game. Why can't you do that in NHL preseason? Get Nathan MacKinnon out there, and if you can't, you can only make the change during the intermission. Say they got to play. You would put him out there for a period just to get the game flow down, and and then he's gone, and then he's done. Then he's done. He played 20 minutes, or he played a 20-minute period, and then he's out. And then you can dress a ton of guys and make these changes. Why can't you do that in the NHL?
That doesn't make any sense. Like, that would be the best idea, to put Nathan MacKinnon out there. That whole top line, whoever's healthy, put him out for the first period. They could set the tempo and see, like, you could sit on the bench and observe how everybody else is going to play, because those are your line mates. Those are your brothers for the rest of the season. You need to understand how everybody works. Just get out there. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of them not even being around on the bench.
No. And then they can take the pads off and then just wear the jersey.
Yep.
Like the quarterbacks do on the sideline.
Put on the tracksuit, the cool new tracksuit that we got.
And they can stand on the bench with Bednar or something like that if they wanted to, or they can just hang out, just be there, and you're just getting those little bits of game flow and under your belt. So when game one comes, because I'm excited for Av Chicago, but I'm also feeling like it's going to be a mess of a game.
Yep.
Because it usually is game one, because the timing is not there. And if you could just get 6 or 7 minutes, I know that sounds like nothing, but for a period, Cale Makar played 25 minutes the other day. Do I want Cale Makar playing 25 minutes in a preseason game? I don't. I'm sorry. But if you had him just sporadically, like a smattering of minutes here and there, spread across all of the preseason games, I just feel like that would be a little bit better. You get them conditioned a little bit more, you get in the game speed, and then when game one comes, you're not working all that stuff out in game one against Chicago.
Because that's the last thing I want to hear after the Chicago game, getting ready for Calgary the next night, the alleged number 1 or 2 with the Athletic, that Nathan MacKinnon, it's taking me a minute to get used to everything. No, that's what preseason's for. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it.
I know. Like I'm saying, like, I don't want them to play like these full games. That's what they're doing. And you're cramming all this stuff into the end of the preseason, and then in practice, and you can get what you can get out of practice, but that's not, an opponent. I don't know. Just something of consideration, I think, could be addressed. And why not have, because you're still going to get those guys that are trying to make the team. They'll get the majority of the minutes in period 2 and 3. I don't know. Something to think about.
We need to be commissioners, man.
Yeah, dude. Co-commissioners. I think we could do that.
Yeah. It looks like those dudes on the Muppet Show.
Oh, the 2 old guys.
Yeah.
Oh my God. My kids watch that all the time, and now I'm blanking on their name.
That's what we'll just have, like that little booth of the Muppet Show Theater, and we'll just sit there and tell the league how to go.
Yeah. All right. And why not throw out some, like I said, not Stanley Cup predictions, but maybe more or less Stanley Cup matchups that we would like to see if the Avalanche do get back to the Stanley Cup final. Is there anybody out there based on, well, I know like your East Coast team are the Devils. And you throw them out there if you want to. You would love to see an Avalanche Devils Stanley Cup final. One of them.
Like, selfishly, like, especially now that I get to enjoy hockey with my kids, to like have that moment of like Avalanche Devils Part 2 with my kids. Like, that was like the moment that really landed like my fandom to like superstar like fandom, was that Devils series. Like I fell in love with them during the Florida Panthers series, but to enjoy Avs Devils, my two teams, that would be selfishly what I'd like to see, and it would indicate a power shift in the East. So for the league and going forward, if that even happens, like because honestly, the Devils are building the exact same way that Colorado is. So if it's almost like the Avalanche are, it's like Avalanche Part 2 is what the Devils are building. So it would be really good to see that.
And for what it's worth, on the Athletics season previews, they have New Jersey at 19. So they've broken into the teens. And I'm a big Hughes fan. I wasn't to start his career, but just watching him and just like the fun that he seems to be having, like he's enjoyable to watch. So as unlikely as that matchup is there any that of a matchup of a more likely team that could make it?
Florida. I want to see Colorado, Florida. We talked about every chance we had last year. We talked about how good that game was, and that was something we couldn't recapture. Was that the Florida Panther Colorado Avalanche game?
So good.
It was something we chased all year, and we dreamed about that being the Stanley Cup matchup. It didn't turn out to be. Now that we tackled the Giant in Tampa Bay, let's go after Florida. Like that will be a fun one of those that you hope it goes 7 games. Just to watch 7 games between these two in playoff Stanley Cup action. I mean, you can't write a better story than that.
And as far as the Athletic season preview for the Florida Panthers, they're number 4. So they are right behind the Avalanche. So they have them up there again. And even with that big move that they made, they're still up there. Any others? You got a third one, or throw them out there?
And I kind of smiled when you said it. Like the Athletic mentioned it. Just this Avalanche Toronto series is one of those that you just feel like hockey writers have been throwing out there as a prediction for so many years in a row. We finally need it to happen. We need Nathan McKinnon, Austin Matthews. We need Original Six versus the Quebec Nordiques. Like, come on.
That's definitely one of mine, is Avalanche and Toronto. And maybe one of the big reasons why I'd love to see that happen is because whenever Toronto does make it to the Stanley Cup final, it is going to be a huge deal.
Yeah.
Huge deal across not just the NHL landscape, but sports.
Yep.
So I would want to be that other team in there playing them, because you're going to get publicity and noticed just as much as they are. Of course, you want to be the team that beats them, but it's going to be massive news whenever Toronto gets to that Stanley. And they are a good team. I know a lot of people like to make fun of them and say they can't get out of the first round. That's a very real thing. Avalanche couldn't get out of the second round. And, people love to have those, what do they call them? Like the curses, like Curse of Bambino and stuff like that. Like, it's fun to be a fan and talk about those things, but in all reality, they do. And Toronto is a good team, and they have just as big of a chance to make it to the Cup final. And that's why I would love the Avalanche to face them, because you're getting a lot of publicity. If you're the team that finally faces off against Toronto for the first time in 300,000 years, it's a big deal. So that I would like to see. Like, you're a Devils fan on the East Coast. My East Coast team is the Rangers. It was almost there last year. I would have enjoyed to see that, just for selfish reasons. My dad was a big Ranger fan, so it's kind of like I inherently kind of root for them if the Avalanche aren't in it. And then finally, I think, friendships, seeing McKinnon and Crosby, if it was an Avalanche Pittsburgh final, that is another one that would get a lot of publicity, because you have two of the absolute best, one maybe on the down, or definitely on the downside of his career, going up against the, one of the faces of the league. And the fact that they are so close and tight would be a good storyline for the NHL. So I think that,
and it's almost like to see two good best friends, and honestly, it's a baton passing. It's a good bow on the end of Sid's career, and it's one dynasty to potentially another.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's kind of a long shot. Pittsburgh, where do they have them on this thing? It's pretty. Pittsburgh. Oh, they actually had Pittsburgh at number 9 in this thing. Yeah, I think that's a little bit high. So, I mean, I don't know. One of those things, anything can happen in hockey. So, those are probably like the 3 that I would like to see. So, if you're listening and you have your thoughts of who you would like to see the Avs face up against, whether it's your other team like ours or just a fun matchup that you think would be great, throw it out in the comments. We want to know what they are. But other than that, it will wrap it up for today's episode of Locked On Avalanche. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and making it your first listen of the day. Obviously, that's always appreciated. You can follow us on all our socials and wherever you can listen to your podcasts. We're free and available everywhere you do listen to your podcasts. All right, man. That'll wrap it up for today. Yeah, we couldn't get the crossover with Jack. We're still working on that. He's a busy man, so it might get pushed back to next week, but we'll have another one before the season starts with him. So I think, what are we, a week away now? A week away, 7 days. Let's do it. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. For Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan, I am Chris Maselli, and this is the Locked On Avalanche podcast. We'll see you guys tomorrow.